and welcome to VLearn. Session 1, Export-Import Procedures and Documentation, Export-Import Trade. Topic to be covered: Introduction, Legal Framework, Objectives of Export-Import Policy, Registrations, Formalities and Export Licensing, Procedure to obtain export license, General Provisions regarding export and import. So in this session we were going to understand about what exactly the export-import trade is. What was the regulatory framework of all this? So the basic objective of a trade policy revolve around the instruments and techniques of the export promotions and imports management. So that means the overall trade policy of export and import revolve around the export promotions and imports management. So the overview, if we were taking the overview of a legal framework, we need to understand the objectives of export-import policies, registrations formality, major provisions regarding the import-export. So now we were started with the legal framework. एक export-import trade करने के लिए ऐसे कौन से legal frameworks होते हैं जो हमें ध्यान में रखने होते हैं, या what are the basic legal issues to be considered in the mind, and what kind of various acts are there in. Then the foreign trade of India, we were discussing about the foreign trade of India, is governed by the Foreign Trade, which is Development and Regulation Act 1992. The rule and order issued thereunder, the payment for the export and import trade transaction in the terms of Foreign Exchange Management and Act 1999. So the four major acts governing the foreign trade would help in understanding of a foreign trade policy of a country, as also its operational requirements. So in totality, there are the four major acts who were basically working on the foreign trade. So what was that acts are? So the acts are, the first is Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992, which was basically working in the granting of an export-import code EIEC. बेसिक वर्क फॉरेन ट्रेड एक्ट का होता है जो हमें इम्पोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट कोड्स को इशू करता है. So we can say that the prime objective of this act is to provide for the development and regulation of a foreign trade by facilitating the imports into the augmenting export from India, and for the matter concerned therewith and the accidental thereto. So it is all about providing the development and regulations of all the imports and exports of the Indian, and what kind of the matters or whatever the matters arises in that concern, that is export import concerns, they were actually looking for it. So the permission for the export import is also given under this act. इस मेनली इसी एक्ट के अंदर जितनी भी परमिशंस होती हैं वो दी जाती हैं, और वो परमिशंस कैसे दी जाती हैं? बाय गारंटिंग दी इम्पोर्टर्स एंड एक्सपोर्टर कोड नंबर. जब एक एक्सपोर्टर या इम्पोर्टर को किसी भी तरीके की आगे बिजनेस करने के लिए या इम्पोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट में ट्रेड करने के लिए उसे एक कोड नंबर इशू होता है. सो इट इज़ बेसिकली about the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1991. There is another act, that act is Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. This is basically to facilitate, or the main objective of this act is just to work on or to facilitate the external trade and payment, and to promote the orderly development and maintenance of the foreign exchange management in India. So the basic work of this is to work on the external trade and payment to be promoted, orderly development and maintenance of foreign exchange. उस तरीके से काम करना कि जितनी भी हमारी foreign exchange है उसको increase करने में और उसको आगे improve करने में help कर सके. That is why the main work of FEMA is to work on the external trade and payments. At the same time, yes, this act deal with the various regulations also. ये एक्ट और बहुत सारी regulations के साथ डील करता है. That regulations are holding and transactions of foreign exchange, exports of goods and service, realizations and the repetitions of the foreign exchange, etc. So the role of authorized person, the provision of the contraventions and penalties and procedures to adjudications and appeal, the power of directors of enforcement are basically handled in this act. Then the second act is the Customer Act 1962. This basically provides, or the prime objective of this act of providing the guidelines and the procedures related to all the situations emerging from the export-import trade transaction. That means it is main work is to get the proper guidelines or give the proper procedures to the export-imports situations and transactions. Basically working on the transaction part. So the prime objective is, what are the prime objective of this act is regulate the genuine export-import trade transaction in keeping with the national economic policies and objective in a mind. Then to check the smugglings and all, collect the revenues, undertake the functions on behalf of other agencies, and gather the trade strategy. So the five main objective of this act is this. And yes, in the legal framework of export-import trade, the last act is the Export Quality Control and Inspection Act 1963. So this act is basically working on to increase the quality control and pre-shipment inspections. It is basically to strengthen the export trade throughout the quality control and the pre-shipment inspections. Prohibits the export of the substandard goods, and yes, at the same time establishment of export inspection councils and export inspections agency, यानी कि किसी भी तरीके से quality check करना, whether it's pre shipment inspection, basically it's consists with the pre shipment inspection, yes, at the same time considering the substandards goods in that case. So the main objective or the prime objective is just as that, to strengthen the qualities. So yes, at the same time there are few obligations from which this act is free from. So these are the star export houses are there, export orientation units are there, export made against a letter from a foreign buyer setting that he does not require the pre-shipment inspections for any official agencies and product bearing the ISI mark. तो अगर इस तरीके से अगर किसी भी तरीके से goods आते हैं, so they will not comes into that certain inspections. So the next topic is objective of export-import policy. What exactly the objectives of export-import policy? So yes, the main aim of these policies are promoting exports and augmenting the foreign exchange earnings. So हम जब अपने export को ज़्यादा increase करना चाहते हैं, उस पर ज़्यादा work करना चाहते हैं, just the reason behind कि हम एक earning factor increase करना चाहते हैं अपनी country का. And yes, at the same time the another one is regulating the exports wherever it is necessary for the purpose of either avoiding the competition amongst the Indian exporter or ensuring the domestic availability of essential item of the mass communication consumption at the reasonable prices. In terms of हमारी जितनी भी export होती है उसको regulate करना. Regulate in terms of if we were promoting the export, that doesn't mean that we were lacking in our own consumptions. So in that terms उसे minimize करने के लिए avoid the competition amongst the Indian exporter. Indian exporters के अंदर कम से कम competition रखना, and yes, at the same time they're always and make sure that कि जो भी consumptions हमारी required हैं वो सबसे पहले within the country fulfill हो रही हैं और उसके बाद export हो रहा है. So these are the two main purpose and objective of export-import policy. So the objective of export-import policies, they were major aspects of trade policies. Trade policies के कुछ major aspects हैं. So what these major aspects are? सबसे पहले है regulation and management of imports. हम जो भी चीज़ें import कर रहे हैं उसकी proper regulation और उसकी proper management. Second, promotion and regulations of export. Export को ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा promote कैसे किया जाए और उसकी proper regulation. Then introduction of a duty free promotion capital goods, that is the EPCG, in terms of basically working on to increase or introduce the duty free promotions goods जो जिन पे duties नहीं होती ऐसे capital goods को launch करना. Fourth, strengthening of the advanced licensing system, and yes, work on the advanced licensing system कि किस तरीके से आप अपने licensing system पर और work on कर सकते हैं. Another is liberalizing the import and boost the export. हम अपने import को liberalize करें, at the same time we boost the export. Simplification of a procedures and reduce the interface between the exporters and the DGFT. DGFT is what? The Director General of Foreign Trade. So in terms of simplifying overall procedures of export-import trade, हमारे जो export-import trades होते हैं उनके procedures को simplify करना. Another is increase the transparency in the change trading environment. That means it is working on to be very much clear with your trading environment, be very much clear with your trading concept. So this is the transparency concept. Strengthening the domestic industrial growth, that is working on to how a country can improve their domestic industrial growth with the help of export import. Then generation of employment by giving the recognition to SSI sector, that is to working on in the जनरेशन ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट की किस तरीके से हम अपने स्मॉल स्केल्स इंडस्ट्री सेक्टर्स के अंदर ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा एम्प्लॉयमेंट को जनरेट कर सकते हैं. देन टू ड्राइव द मैक्सिमम बेनिफिट फ्रॉम एक्सपेंडिंग द ग्लोबल मार्केट अपॉर्चुनिटी, दैट इज़ टू वर्क ऑन कि हम किस तरीके से अपनी ग्लोबल अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ जितनी भी अराइज होती हैं कैसे उसे ऑप्ट करके एक बेनिफिट जनरेट कर सकते हैं. देन टू एनहांस द टेक्नोलॉजी स्ट्रेंथ एंड एफिशिएंसीज ऑफ इंडियन कल्चर, इंडस्ट्री एंड सर्विस, दैट मीन्स हाउ वी कैन स्ट्रेंथ देम सेल्फ, हम अपने आप को कैसे स्ट्रेंथफुल बना सकते हैं, कैसे अपने आप को एफिशिएंट बना सकते हैं विद द हेल्प ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट एंड टेक्नोलॉजी. इन टर्म्स ऑफ द टेक्नोलॉजी पार्ट की एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट्स की मदद से हम कैसे अपनी टेक्नोलॉजी को इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं जो कि फर्दर हेल्प करती है हमारी एग्रीकल्चर, इंडस्ट्रीज एंड सर्विस सेक्टर के अंदर. नाउ द रजिस्ट्रेशन फॉर्मेलिटीज एंड एक्सपोर्ट लाइसेंसिंग. यस, किसी भी तरीके के एक्सपोर्ट ट्रेड स्टार्ट करने से पहले बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी होता है लाइसेंसिंग और फॉर्मेलिटीज, रजिस्ट्रेशन फॉर्मेलिटीज को फुलफिल करना. सो नाउ व्हाट आर द वेरियस रजिस्ट्रेशन फॉर्मेलिटीज इन एक्सपोर्ट लाइसेंसिंग. The first concept to be considered, that is importers exporter code number. This is basically the kind of the sign or registration function which proven uh, that which actually proves ki yes, the person have that number, that means person has registered in particular country to work on the export import. So no export or no import shall be made by any person विदाउट एनी इम्पोर्टर एक्सपोर्टर कोड नंबर. सो किसी अगर एक पर्सन के पास इम्पोर्टर एक्सपोर्टर कोड नंबर नहीं है तो वो किसी भी तरीके की एक्सपोर्टर इम्पोर्ट्स में डील नहीं कर सकता. यस, एट द सेम टाइम एनी एप्लीकेशन ऑफ अ ग्रांट ऑफ IEC number shall be made by the registrar head office of the applicant to the regional import export licensing authority along with the following document. In terms of बहुत सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स की सबमिशन के साथ उस पर्टिकुलर नंबर के लिए अप्लाई करना पड़ता है. सो वो डॉक्यूमेंटेशंस कौन कौन से होते हैं. द फर्स्ट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इज प्रोफाइल ऑफ द एक्सपोर्टर एंड इम्पोर्टर, पर्सन कौन है उसका ओवरऑल प्रोफाइल. सेकेंड, द बैंक रिसिप्ट इन द डुप्लीकेट DD फॉर ₹1000 एज एन अ फी. तो ₹1000 सबमिट करवाने होते हैं एज एन अ फी. देन certificate from the bankers of the applicant. Yes, you have to confirm your banker as well as एक कंपनी को अगर वो एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट में आती है तो उन्हें अपना एक बैंकर डिसाइड करना होता है जस्ट टू डील विद ऑल दी एक्सटर्नल डीलिंग और एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट ट्रेड. देन 2 copies of a passport size photograph of the applicant duly attested by the banker. In terms of आपको 2 passport size photographs देनी होती हैं which definitely attested by your bank. Then if there is any no resident interest in the applicant firm and a NRI investment is with the full reputation's benefit, provide the full particular and enclosures photocopy of RBI approval for such investment. In that terms, yes, you have to take the approval. अगर किसी भी तरीके की NRI investments हैं या किसी भी तरीके की नॉन रेजिडेंट इंटरेस्ट अराइज है तो उस केस में RBI की अप्रूवल लेनी पड़ती है किसी भी तरीके के इम्पोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट्स के लिए. देन delegations on the applicant's letterhead above the applicant's non-association with the Croatian listed firms. In terms of जितनी भी हमारी Croatian listed firms होती हैं जो कि जिनकी परमिशंस नहीं होती हैं कि वो एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट में आ सकती हैं तो उसकी एक डिक्लेरेशन देनी होती है that that person or that letterhead particularly not belongs to that particular listed company. And yes, इसके अलावा एक डॉक्यूमेंट और होता है जो सबमिट कराना होता है, दैट इज द कॉपी ऑफ अ पैन कार्ड. पैन कार्ड इज बेसिकली परमानेंट अकाउंट नंबर ऑफ द इनकम टैक्स. सो आपको वो भी सबमिट करवाना होता है. After that, getting the IEC, the another registration formality is the registration cum membership certificate, that is RCMC, which the exporter and importer have to take. So any person applying for the license to import or export of or for any other benefit on the Concessions under this policy shall be required to furnish the registrations cum membership certificate. So it is may be obtained from any one of the export promotion council or any of the commodity board, or that it can be taken from any kind of FIEO or by the EPEDI or the MPEDA or administrative authorities of um, EHTP or STP units. So in that case, yes, आपको एक membership card लेना होता है when you are entering into the any kind of export import. So export of the registered exporter having valid RCMC will only qualify for the benefits provided in the exempt policy. So exempt policy के अंदर जितने भी एक benefits हमारे exporters को provide करवाए जाते हैं वो तभी valuable होंगे, वो तभी consider किए जाएंगे अगर एक exporter के पास RCMC कार्ड होगा तो, सर्टिफिकेट होगा तो. So yes, all goods may be exported without any restrictions. Expect to extend such export are regulated by the negative list of export. So the basic negative list of the exports or the negative list consists of a goods. They were basically comes into the three parts. हमारी जितनी भी नेगेटिव लिस्ट ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट्स होती हैं यानी कि वो गुड्स जो कि हमारे एक्सपोर्टिंग गुड्स के अंदर नहीं आते वो तीन पार्ट्स में डिवाइडेड हैं. सबसे पहला है दी प्रोहिबिटेड आइटम्स. प्रोहिबिटेड आइटम्स आर दोज आइटम्स विच कैन नॉट बी एक्सपोर्टेड और इम्पोर्टेड. वो आइटम्स जो किसी भी तरीके से एक्सपोर्ट इम्पोर्ट नहीं हो सकती हैं. दीज आइटम इंक्लूड एनी काइंड ऑफ वाइल्ड लाइफ, एनी काइंड ऑफ एक्जॉटिक बर्ड्स, wild flora, beef, human skeletons, tolls, fat and oil of any one animal origins, excluding fish oil, wood and wood products in the form of logs, timber, stems, roots, barks, chip, powders, flakes, dust, plump and caracol. तो ये जो होते हैं ये prohibited items होते हैं जिनको आप बिल्कुल भी export import नहीं कर सकते. एंड यस मोर और लेस दे वर नॉट द काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स जो जिनके लिए एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्ट होनी चाहिए. सेकेंड इज द रिस्ट्रिक्टेड आइटम्स. रिस्ट्रिक्टेड आइटम इज कम्स इनटू द एनी गुड्स द एक्सपोर्ट और इंपोर्ट ऑफ विच इज रिस्ट्रिक्टेड थ्रू द लाइसेंसिंग may be export or imported only in accordance with the license issued in this behalf. So restricted items वो होती हैं जो कि basically licensing मिलने पर ही आप export import में आ सकते हो. Third part is the cancellized item. Cancellized item basically the any goods the importer or exporter of which is cancellized may be importer or exporter by cancellizing agency specified in the negative list. तो बहुत सी ऐसी हमारी एक्सपोर्ट और इम्पोर्टेड एजेंसीज होती हैं जिनको कैंसल्ड किया जाता है कि वो इस पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट के अंदर डील नहीं कर सकते, सो वो कैंसलाइज्ड गुड के अंदर आ जाते हैं. So these are basically the three kind of goods which have a negative list. तो वो negative list में आते हैं जिसके अंदर हम export import में deal नहीं कर सकते. Now what are the basic provisions or procedure to obtain the export import license? तो हम जब किसी भी तरीके का export import license लेना होता है तो उसके लिए क्या क्या procedure होता है? So that procedure basically comes from an application for the grant of the export license may be made in the prescribed form to the Director General of the Foreign Trade or its regional licensing authority. For restricted items, an application is to be made in a duplicate of the appropriate form. There are two different export license application forms. So in that case, आपको एक application form submit करवाना होता है जो कि आपको DGFT को submit करवाना होता है. If you were dealing in or you want a permission for the restricted items, so in that comes you have to take the duplicate copy of that appropriate form. So applications of the export of registrations basically they were comes into the items the application of export of registered item except the social chemicals and special materials, equipment and technology. These form is sent to the Director General of the Foreign Trade and New Delhi. Applications for grant of the export license for the export of the special chemicals etc. application are to be sent to the DGFT, and yes, the inter-ministerial group under the chairmanship of the DGFT shall consider the application for the export of these items. सो इन दैट केस अगर आप किसी भी तरीके के केमिकल या स्पेशल केमिकल्स के अंदर डील करें तो उस केस में भी यू हैव टू टेक द परमिशन ऑफ DGFT. Now, what are the basic general provisions regarding the export and import? Export और import के regarding क्या क्या ऐसी general provisions हैं जो कि ध्यान में रखनी होती हैं? So in that terms, yes, this is the first provisions comes into the policy various the liberalized various provisions of import export. The first is export and import free unless regulated. That means the export and import are free expect to extend their regulated by the provision of a policy or any law for the time being in a force. So the item wise export import policy is specified in the ITCs that published by the DGFT. So in that terms, yes, वो item which are unless regulated, that means वो जो कि वो goods which are except to extend that they will be regulated by the provisions of the policies. So what compliances or what regulations or provisions they have to take care? सबसे पहला है the compliance with law. In terms of every exporter or importer is to compel with the provision of the foreign trade, which is the Foreign Trade Act 1992, and the rules and the order made thereunder. So there are also required to compel with the provisions of a policy, terms and conditions of any license granted and provisions of any other law for the time being in a force. Then second is the interpretation of policy. This is if any of the doubt arises in respect of the interpretations of any provision of policy, it will be referred to the DGFT, whose decisions will be finally taken. And yes, the third is the exemptions from policies and procedures. Any request for the relaxation of that provisions of that policy or any kind of procedures on the ground of hardship or an advised impact on the trade may be made by the DGFT again. Fourth is trade with the negotiating countries. In terms of the Director General of Foreign Trade may issue from time to time such instructions of a frame such schemes as may be required to promote the trade and strengthen the economy tie with the neighboring countries. Then another is trade with the Russia under the debit repayment agreement. In this case, the trade with the Russia under the debit repayment agreement, the DGFT may issue from time to time instructions or a frame scheme. Transit facility was there. Transit of a goods through India from to another country adjacent to India shall be regulated in accordance with the treaty between the Indian and those countries. The way that is basically regulated by the rules of that country. Then the execution of a bank guarantee legal undertaking, whatever any duty free import is allowed or where otherwise specifically stated, the importer shall execute a legal undertaken or a bank guarantee with the customs authority before clearance of a good through the customs. So however, exporter with the export turnover of at least rupees 5 crores in the currency, so in that terms the procedure licensing year and a good track record of 3 years of the exporter will be permitted for that legal undertaking. Then another is the free movement of export goods. These are consignment of items allow for the export shall not be withhold or delay for any reasons by any agency. In the case of any doubt, the authorities concerned may ask for the undertaking for the export. Then another is the third party export. This basically working on getting a license holder may export directly or through the third party. Clearance of goods from the custom. This is basically the goods already import shipped arrived in advance but not cleared from the custom may also be cleared against the license issued subsequently. Then electronic data's interchange, that is EDI. It is an basically impact to work towards the greater simplification, standardization, harmonizing of the trade documents. So that is DGFT shall move towards an automated environment of filling and revitalizing or authentication of the document with other community partner including the customers and Bank. Then in terms of export, as we study about the export and import, so now we were individually discussing about what's general provisions regarding the export. So it should be, or it can be, the free export in terms of all goods may be exported without any restriction. Expect to be extend such export are regulated by ITCs or any other provisions of this policies or any other law for a time being in force. That comes into the free export. Then export of samples. A specific provision has been let down for the export of the sample and a free of charge goods. Then denomination of the export contract. This is all export contracts and invoice shall be denominated in the freely convertible currency of India or Indian rupee, but export procedures shall be realized in the freely convertible currency. So contract of which payment are received through the Asian Clearance Union, that is ACU, shall be denominated in the ACU dollar. Then realization of the export procedure. If any exporter fails to realize the export procedures within the time specified by the uh, Reserve Bank of India, he shall be liable to action into accordance with the provisions of the Act and the policy. Another is the export of goods and spares. Goods basically include the edible item of value not exceeding rupees 5 lakh in licensing year may be exported as in a gift. So those items mentioned as restricted from the export shall not be exported as in a good, as in a gift without a license. So the certificate permission is required in that. And in the spares part, yes, warranty spares, whether the indigenous or imported plant equipment, machineries, automobiles or any other goods except from those restricted that may be export all or along with the main equipped or subsequently. So that is, this shall be done within the contract warranty period of such goods subject to the approval of RBI. Then other is the export of the passenger baggage. It is the bona fide basically personal baggage. It may be exported either along with the passenger or in the unaccompanied with 1 year before or after the passenger departs from India. So those items mentioned as restricted shall not be licensed, shall require a license except in case of eligible items. Then export of imported goods, replacement goods and repaired goods. So in that case, goods imported in accordance with this policy may be exported in the same and subsequently the same form without a license. So certificate, permissions or authority, it is basically required. So this can be done provided that the item to be imported or exported is not mentioned as restricted from the export import. That is the first concept. Second is the replacement good, which relates to the goods or a part thereof on bearing the exporters and found the defective, damaged or otherwise unfit for use may be replaced free of change by the exporter. So such goods shall not be allowed cleansance by the customs authority provided that the replacement of goods are not mentioned as a restricted item for the export in the country. Then another is the repaired goods. Repaired goods are basically the goods or the part through not on being exported and found the defective, damage or otherwise unfit for the use may be imported for repair or subsequently re-export. Such goods shall not be allowed clearance without the license and in accordance with the custom notification issued in this behalf. So in that comes the another, that is remissions of the service tax in that is domestic tariff area. So for all goods and services which are exported from unit into the DTA and unit in EOU or it can be EHTB. So that is remissions of the service tax is basically allowed. Then the exemptions from the taxes in the SEZ, that is SEC units are exempted from the service tax. Then private bonded warehousing, that is private bonded warehouses exclusively for the export may be set up in domestic uh, tariff area as per the norms and conditions of the procedures the goods from domestic manufacturer without the payment of duty. So the supplies may be or made by the domestic supplier to the notify the warehouse shall be treated as the physical export provided the payment for the same are made in the foreign exchange uh, or in the foreign exchange. So that comes into the private bond warehouse. Then another is comes into the export. We did the export, now comes the import part. Import part, the initial one is the actual user condition. This is what capital goods, raw material, intermediaries, component, consumable, spare spare parts, accessories, instruments and other goods which are importable without any restrictions may be imported by any person. Second hand goods, all the second hand goods except the second hand capital goods are restricted from the import and may be imported only in accordance with the provisions of the policy. So the import of the second hand capital goods include the conditions spares are allowed freely except the personal computer, laptop or the photocopy or machine photocopy machineries, or it can be air conditioner, or it can be diesel generating set which will be allowed against the license. Another is the import of a gift. Import of a gift basically shall be permitted where such goods are otherwise freely importable under this policy. Then import of export basis, that means new or the second hand jugs, future fixtures, dies, module patterns and press tools the the last. So the construction machineries, containers, packages maintained for the packaging of the goods for the export and other equipments may be imported for the export without a license on execution of legal understanding bank guaranteeing with the custom authority. So that is another point. Then next is re-improvement of the export basis in terms of capital goods, equipment components, spare parts, accessories. Yes, at the same time, whether imported or indigenous may be sent abroad for the repair, testing, quality improvement or upgrading of technology and re-improvement without a license. So in that case, another is comes into the import of machine and equipment used in the project abroad. After the completion of the project abroad, the project contracts may import without a license used goods, including capital goods, provided they have been used at least for 1 year. Then another is the sale on a high sea, that is sale of a goods on a high sea for import into the India may be made the subject to the policy or uh, any other law for the time being in a force. Then another is import under the lease financing. This is permission of a licensing authority is not required for the import of new capital goods under the lease financing. Then public and private bounded warehouse for import, that means such warehouse may be set up in DTA. So import goods except the prohibited items, arms and ammunitions, hazardous waste, chemical may be warehoused. So such goods may be cleared from the home consumption on the payment of the custom duty applicable at the time of a clearance of the goods. Another is export promotion capital goods scheme. So this is new and old capital goods including also for the pre and post production facilities and capital goods in that case. Then yes, there are few questions which you have to do it yourself. First is what are the general provisions regarding the export and import. So you have to give the examples of all these general provision which is related to export and import, and yes, at the same time the export import free unless regulations. And another is explain the import export code number. What is IEC number? You have to explain it, and why it is required IEC number. So this is all about for the today's session. We were winding up here. Thank you so much. Happy learning. We learn.